Well, everybody, welcome back. Today, we're going to tackle a short task here. If you have a basement and you're in an area where you don't have a natural drop or flow, you're going to be all familiar with the sump pump that you need in order to keep water out of your basement. It's really important if you have a finished basement. You get water backed up, you're ruining your carpet and everything else. So, it's been several years since I've replaced this. It's starting to get a lot of corrosion from the minerals in the ground onto the float, and it's hanging up and just not operating like it should. Now's the time to replace it. I have a spare that I fixed at one time. I want to revisit that one before I put a brand new one in. I do have a new one in case I need it, but I'd like to get some more life out of the one that I fixed several years ago. Otherwise, I'll probably never use it. So what we're going to do is go up and put some, I just don't trust the seal. I'll explain that when we go to the garage and look at it. But I don't trust the seal. I think some moisture got into the top and the switch mechanism stopped working. So for now, we are looking at replacing the sump pump. This is the spare that I have. There's the one in use. Again, it still works fine, but the float is kind of hanging up. It's just time to get that cleaned up or replaced. The water has a ton of minerals and iron and calcium and all kinds of stuff. It just builds up and just destroys everything. It's just kind of home maintenance. It's preventative. Hopefully it keeps us from ever having water in the basement. But that is going to be the task for today. If I remember right, it does look like this is used more. But again, once it's in that water, I don't think I had this in there a year. But what had happened is up here in the top, this switch, it was faulty and it would stay on. It would burn. It would get hot. But the problem with the one that's in there now, this bar, this rod is getting really corroded, and so this isn't freely moving up and down. I'm just worried with its age that we'll have problems. I'm going to take this top off, and I'll show you why I didn't want to just put this in there. I did fix it, but I feel like I want to revisit one more time what's inside of here. Three. Okay. And see what we have here. So we have wires connected. It's this gasket is what I was worried about. Kind of hard to see. You see this rubber gasket here. I feel like it wasn't quite sealed like it should have been. I think what I'm going to do, I might just put some grease on it, but there's a switch up in here. Kind of hard for you to see. See that switch up in there? That switch is what failed. I replaced it. I've tested it. I know this thing works, but this seal right here, this rubber seal, it looks intact. I think it would be okay. I just think that water got inside of here and caused some problems. I think what I'll do is put some dielectric grease on these fittings here, and I might just put dielectric grease around this outside just to help seal that back up. Doesn't look like there was water sitting in there, so that's what we're going to do. Put this thing back in operation, and hopefully that new switch will function without problem. I think that's pretty good. Let's get this back here. That checks out inside there. We're going to go with it. I did put some dielectric grease around the gasket. Hopefully that'll help seal it up as well. But overall, I think this is ready to go. Let's get this back down in the sump pit and replace the one that's in there, and hopefully we get a better, smoother action out of this switch. Well, before we change this out, let's make sure the backup sump works. That way we're not... Yeah, see, this does need change. That rod is hanging up the float. It really should go farther. There should be more water taken out of there every time. But let's make sure the backup works in case this takes me a long time to to swap out, I want to make sure I've got water pumping out. We have a really high water table, so I want to make sure I'm still protected. Then you can turn it off. I had to go ahead and jam that old one back in there. The amount of corrosion and crust and lime and scale that's on there, I could not get this pipe out. I was just going to unthread it, thread it into the other one. I can't do that. So I had to run to the hardware store. I had to put this one back in quick. Run to the hardware store, get some new fittings, come back, and now we've got this here. Let's go out in the garage and assemble the other motor before we take this one back out. It is working again, as you can see. So we're fine for now, but we need to get that other motor set up. If I had had an emergency and needed to change this out in a pinch, I wouldn't have had the things I needed. So we're going to make sure everything's in order before we swap this out, and then we're going to get on with it. So we need to measure this pipe, make sure we got the right height, and get this swapped out. All right, well, sometimes you run into trouble when you're working on these projects. Some pumps, at least in our area, we have a very high water table. You got to be quick about changing these things out. It's a good thing that I started looking at this and before it actually went bad. The corrosion that was on that pipe, I could not unthread it and just put this pump back in. It wasn't going to work. So fortunately, the pump was still good. So I put everything back in, ran to the hardware store, bought a bunch of fittings. Some of them I got that are going to work and some aren't going to work. You know how it is if you ever do any plumbing. The backup's working. The regular sump pump is back in working. Now, let's get this one assembled. And I'm going to take all these down and we'll cut it to length down there. I'm hoping that we have enough length to make a spare pipe. So we can actually, because I have another pump too, and I just want to have the pipe ready to go this time. Instead of trying to crank off the pipe from the other one, just get everything ready to go. That way in an emergency, I can unclip the coupling, put the other one in, tighten it back up, plug it back in, and off we go. You know, you got to think at 2 in the morning when the power goes out, or you have the generator, you're trying to run this pump, or the pump goes bad. It's either that or you're going to get thousands of dollars worth of damage in your basement. So we got all the parts I think we need. Let's go back down, cut the pipes to length, glue them together, and try to get this project completed. I'm going to go ahead and take that out, swap it in. I don't think you need to see that. I just need to get it done, measure, cut my piece, and then get this new pump in there and hopefully get everything situated. We got everything back together. Good enough. Didn't have all the materials I needed, but we'll just do a quick test, make sure it's working. I already got the backup pump situated, so that's ready to go. Now we just want to make sure it doesn't come on before the main pump. back in action. Now, we're gonna take this one back to the garage, get this pipe out of here, and put it in my brand new one, which is over here. Yeah. So we'll have an official backup ready to go with the pipe ready to go, so we won't mess with all those problems next time. Well, nothing ever goes like you think, and this sump pump is no exception. But now that I've finished installing the replacement, I have one more brand new sump pump that I want to stage, considering all the problems I just had. Now I've learned a few things. I want to stage that new pump so it's ready to go in case it completely fails. I can quickly swap it out. That's what I intended on doing this time, but I could not get the pipe out of the old sump pump. That's what we're going to work on next, and we'll get the new one staged, and we'll go down there and just clean up the area and have everything set and ready to go for an emergency. Here's what we have. As you can see, the line, the scale, the buildup on these pumps. Water is just such a terrible thing for things. This pipe is just a PVC pipe. It should not be that bad, but it just goes to show you how damaging water can be. But if you look at this thing, you can see I was having trouble. Originally, everything was still working, but this had so much scale on it, the rod where this slides up and down, it would bind up. And so the travel would just run for a second and shut off, run for a second, shut off. It was going to burn the motor up anyway. And I started cleaning this thing off a little bit. You can see that scale. And I decided, let's just swap it out. This one's been running for at least 7 years. It's time to get that thing out of the water and put a new one in. I will keep this only for parts in case a switch up inside the top of the head of this thing fails or I need a component, but I do not intend on reusing this pump back in that pit. I have a brand new one that we're going to stage. I want to get this pipe out of here and put it in that new pump. That's all from the water scale and build up. Yeah, there was no way that I was going to get that out of there if you see me struggle with it before while it was in that sump pit. No way. Not at all. I'm going to use like a wire brush and clean this up a little bit. But this fitting should fit into the new replacement pump. If not, I have some other fittings. But you can just see how rusty that was. I mean, the casting's okay. I mean, it's fine if it's on there, but the problem is that scale just starts building up and impeding how this thing functions. So always check your pumps. Doesn't hurt to replace them from time to time if you don't want to have water in your basement. See if we can get some of that off. You can see just how thick that buildup is over the years. And it's starting to rust. Eventually that could rust through. But it doesn't matter. We're not going to reuse this pump. But there are some components in here that might be useful. Maybe the cord, the float if I cleaned it up. I don't plan on using it, but there's a switch in here that I had to replace one time. That could be useful. Let's get this cleaned up and let's get things reassembled. Okay, here's our brand new replacement. And it did not come with an adapter, so that's okay, because we've got one on the pipe. So we want to have this ready for the next emergency. Simply put that on there. And we have another 1/2 horse pump ready to go with the pipe that's already to this right length. Well, there you go. We are done with this project. We cleaned all this up, use a vacuum, get all the dirt and crust out. The pit is just going to crust up again with water. But we do have a good pump in there now. The thing's running fine. We've got our backup, it's running fine, and we have our spare setup ready to quickly change out in the event of emergency. Same pump, ready to go. We've also got a utility pump. If we were to back up with water, I could actually hook a hose to that and run it out the window and just get water out of here really quick. There's a separate float. If you look in the pit there, there's a float that's on the backup pump. That's a spare one of those. And we've got a couple check valves in that bag, basically replacements for these in case one of those fails. So we're in good shape. Something good to check on every few years. Make sure your pumps are running. It's either that, a few $100, fix it now, or you got water in your basement, you got thousands of dollars in damage. So I hope you enjoyed. It's not my typical video, but I like to share everything I'm working on. Thanks for watching, everybody.